colleagues. They say that history repeats itself, and it is becoming increasingly clear that here in Michigan, we are about to return to a gilded age, the gilded age of the early 1900s, when there were two classes, the rich and the poor. That was all that existed in our society. The effort to dismantle collective bargaining is really about one thing and one thing only: greed. Economic and political greed. CEOs in Michigan and elsewhere are sitting on record profits and receiving lavish compensation that would have seemed unthinkable just a few years ago, but apparently, at least for some, that's not enough. Now they want unchecked power to drive down the pay and benefits of Michigan's middle class so they can pocket more of that money for themselves. They have forgotten the fundamental insight of Henry Ford when he decided to pay his workers enough so they can afford to buy the products they were helping him build. We built the American middle class in Michigan, but now extremists want to turn back the clock to a time when there was no middle class, when workers and their families had no bargaining rights, and were at the mercy of CEOs. Who are the real targets here? Well, I believe that people like billionaire Dick DeVos and the other neo-robber barons who are bankrolling this effort to dismantle collective bargaining believe that people who work for them are nothing but costs that need to be minimized, and they are determined to destroy any entity capable of resisting their drive to reincarnate fully the Gilded Age in the 21st century. Labor unions, which came into being in the first quarter of the 20th century, fight for the humanity and rights of workers and their families, and are being targeted because they continue to fight for middle-class wages for all workers, whether you're in a union or not. They are being targeted because unions support public policies that hold CEOs accountable for living up to their commitments to society and prevent them from harming communities and the middle class. They are being targeted because unions support and organize in favor of candidates, elected officials, and political organizations that share their values of freedom and equal opportunity and empowerment for all. By stripping a union of the ability to collect dues or fees from all workers represented by that union, so-called right to work profoundly undermines the unity and organizing capacity of all unions. Make no mistake about it. If a worker at a company where a union is present can receive benefits of union representation without paying dues or basic fees, why would anyone pay? You can be sure that none of the CEOs supporting right to work would stand for legislation that denied them the freedom to charge a fair price for the goods and services rendered by their corporations. They would be justifiably outraged if someone pushed through a law that required them to allow people to consume goods and services without paying for them. Think of the reaction of the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, which reversed its position and now supports this right to work legislation. If a bill were being enacted that required its member corporations to provide their goods and services for free and enabled freeloaders to eat at a restaurant or work out at a health club or even stay at a hotel or receive professional services or even be able to sue in the event those services are not being provided. And yet that is precisely what right to work will mean for unions in our state. Now I'd like to say spend a minute talking a little bit about this issue of choice, because we've heard a lot about that from some of the advocates. Now it can hardly be lost on anyone that the right-wing supporters of right-to-work legislation are awfully selective when they champion the right to choose. Ask them about whether women should be allowed the right to choose when it comes to becoming or remaining pregnant, and they are not interested. Ask them if all people should be able to have their choice of a lifelong partner recognized as a marriage, and they tell you that they know better than the people themselves. So the extremists who now dominate the GOP are very choosy about choice, offering freeloaders the choice to avoid paying for union representation even when they are the direct beneficiaries of it, but not when a woman or a couple face life-changing decisions. Mr. Speaker, that's really the bottom line when it comes to this legislation. While Michigan plummets down the national rankings in standard of living, the authors of this legislation think that tipping the political and economic scales in favor of the wealthy and powerful is on a bill that would place Michigan in the same category as 11 of the 15 states who are poorest in the nation and half of the top 10 states in unemployment. Why are we going there? Now, I said at the outset that we have entered a new Gilded Age, and I'd like to close by quoting a figure from history who was with us prior to the Gilded Age, who has been getting a lot of attention lately. He said the following: labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor, and could never have existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is the superior of capital and deserves much the higher consideration.
You realize you cannot do any live shots.
Abraham Lincoln said that.
And you'll have to go out either left or right.
And looking at the economy of the 21st century, where labor's productivity since 1980 has grown by 78%, and yet the wages of men in this case, I have statistics for men, I'm afraid I don't have statistics for the entire workforce, have actually fallen by 10% in that time for men who earned only a high school degree. And even for men and women who have college degrees, their wages have only gone up 32%, which is only half of what the productivity of labor in our economy has grown in the last 25 to 30 years now. Something is broken in our economy, and it is not the fault of the labor movement. Now, I'm confident that if you were here with us today, Lincoln would ask us why we're passing legislation where auto companies will end up paying less to workers but have fewer people to buy their products. Home builders will have cheaper labor, but who will be able to afford a new home? Bars will pay bartenders less but have fewer customers. Locally owned retailers will continue to dry up as discretionary income dwindles. Insurance agents will find customers skipping payments and taking more risks because they have less and less to lose. Hospitals and doctors will find patients putting off healthcare needs and then unable to pay when the day of reckoning arrives. That is the future that Governor Snyder and the Republican majority are forcing on our people. I think the father of their party would be ashamed of them today. By seeking to destroy collective bargaining and driving down pay and benefits for all but CEOs and their friends, right-wing extremists are putting the finishing touches on the Gilded Age and will leave the middle class no choice but to leave Michigan. I urge a no vote on this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.